Welcome to More Than a Few Words, a marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And one of the most difficult questions every business owner has to answer is, what do I charge for my product or service? And that's what we're going to talk about today. My guest, oh shit, sorry. We're going to start over. Janene Liston. I'm sorry, I had Janine in my head and I didn't have the Liston in front of me, so it's going to be one of those days.
Relax. I'm not in a rush personally, so.
Cool. Welcome to More Than a Few Words, marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And, one of the most difficult questions every business owner has to answer is, what do I charge? How much? What's my product worth? It sounds like an easy question with a complicated answer, and that's why I've invited Janene Liston to join me in this conversation. She's a trusted business strategist and pricing expert. She helps female-led service-based businesses profitably grow their business, ensuring that they can confidently create, communicate, and charge for the value they deliver. Watch out. Her passion for pricing is contagious. Janene, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lorraine. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited. I love talking about pricing because if you get it right, you're on the road to business success. And if you don't, it's kind of a slog.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we can go in lots of directions. Why don't we start with some of the myths around pricing, some of the things that people carry around and think, I got to do this or I shouldn't do that.
Right. I think one of the biggest myths that I see people tell themselves is that the lowest price always wins. And what I find funny about it is if I talk to people about it, they're like, oh, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But the way they behave and the actions that they're taking in their business often tell a very different story.
Absolutely. It's funny because if you think about when you go shopping and there are 3 cameras on the shelf and you look at that low priced one and you think, yeah, no, I deserve better. And I mean, there are times where I go for the bottom price, but not on things I really care about.
Right. I think that's a really important point. Well, there's 2 important points in there. One is, who are you targeting? Yeah. Like my dad, if he buys stuff for the garden or flowers, I mean, he just loves that stuff. And it doesn't really matter to some extent how much it is. He just loves it. And he's willing to pay money for it. Me, I'm a little bit more, let's say, economical when it comes to garden things. But when it comes to board gaming, I love my board games. Right. So each and every buyer is a little bit different. And that's why we have target customer groups. So who you're targeting is a very important question to be very clear on the answer to when you're setting your prices.
That is such an important point because if, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. If you can figure out who's really passionate about your product, who really needs your product, price is not going to be the first consideration.
Right.
And so it's really about kind of matching your product with that ideal client.
Yes, and I'd add, or I'd challenge the listeners there to actually put the customer first. I mean, a lot of people, we develop our service offering or we create our product and then we go and try and find somebody to sell it to. And so what would happen if you talk to your customers first, find out what their problem is and how best you can solve it, then created an offer with that in mind, and then priced it with that value deliver? To me, and in my experience, that is a much better way to go about doing things. In all honesty, that's not what most of us do. I can say to some extent myself as well. Yeah, but it's really important if you don't start with the customer first, that you make sure the customer is in there. So I don't know if this is a myth, but it's definitely one of the things that people miss is they over focus on costs and competition, and they kind of neglect the customer when they're setting their prices.
I am reminded as you're telling that story of an engineer who was so excited. I was working in a manufacturing company, and he was so excited that they were using cadmium plated screws.
Mhm.
And he thought I needed to feature that in the marketing. And I kept asking, why? Who cares? And he
Mhm.
was like, well, but it's better. And I kept saying, better for who?
Yes.
And your point about making sure you put the customer front and center. What
Mhm.
do they really want? Because the closer you can align what you offer to what they really want, you get back into that stage of your dad and the gardening equipment.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Mhm.
Okay, you also kind of alluded to something, and I want to pick this a little bit more.
Mhm.
The idea that it's not about cost. It's not about what it takes you to make it. Quite honestly,
Yep.
I don't care how many hours you spent on it. What is it that I should be using as a foundation for my pricing? If not, how much it costs for me to make it?
Right. Love this question. So I talk a lot about what a fair price is because especially for women-led businesses, they have a tendency to leave themselves out of the equation when they're calculating a fair price. They want to make sure everybody else is paid fairly, and then they don't give themselves a salary, and then they wonder why their business doesn't grow, right?
Hmm.
So a fair price has three components to it. First of all, the price itself needs to be related to the value that the customer wants. Yeah. It needs to
Hmm.
be, and I'm going to forget what the three are, even though I talk about it all the time. It needs to be, um, there are enough customers in your target group need to be willing to pay for it. And it needs to be profitable enough for you. So there is a place for cost, but that's not necessarily the basis for your price unless you're selling a commodity. What
Hmm.
most people miss out are the two things related to the customer, which are understanding value, like the economic calculable value, one, and two, the willingness to pay, an understanding of willingness to pay. And those two things most people leave out of their price setting thought process, let's say.
Absolutely. I often think about in the early days of my business, I bought a software product that cost $600. And that
Mhm.
was a lot of money. And I opened the box because back then you didn't download it. You actually got CDs and stuff, and you had to install it on your computer. And I opened up the box, and there were two tiny little CDs and a little booklet. And you looked at it and you think, $600 for this?
Right.
But I wasn't really buying those CDs. I was buying, what could I do
With
with that software?
yeah.
And how quickly could I earn back the $600 and more?
Correct. Correct. And that's really, I always tell people you don't buy the milk for the milk carton, you buy it for the milk. So you don't, your services, the time is just what your services are wrapped in. People don't
Mhm.
buy for you because of the time. They buy from you if you're service, yeah, because of your experience and know-how and your ability to get it done quicker, easier, and better than they can when they do it themselves.
Absolutely. I also want to talk a little bit about what does your price say about the quality of your product?
Yes. So there's a whole fascinating area of pricing psychology. And I think it's very important to pay attention to what your prices are communicating and how the actions you take with your prices communicate about how you feel about what you're offering and your price. So you can't just say a higher price or always means higher quality, but on a psychological level, we do tend to associate a higher
Mhm.
price with better quality. But then if you sell that and you don't deliver it, then you're going to be found out pretty quickly.
Mhm.
I think what's important is to understand, what options there are in the market, where you fit into that range, and then understand, okay, does that match with the value that I'm delivering? Does it match with what the people who I want to serve or who are most interested in working with me really want? Because if
Mhm.
you offer something luxury and they just want something that's cheap and dirty, then it's not going to work. So it's partially it's about alignment, I would say, and making sure it's aligned with your business, your values in your business, your own values personally, but then also with the customer's needs and what they want. Yeah.
Uh-oh. I totally agree because I remember losing a sale one time because the guy said I was too inexpensive and he didn't think that I could deliver the quality that he was going to pay for.
Right.
I never made that mistake again.
Well, one of the funny things I find about pricing is, and this goes back to your very first question around myths. People think that once they find a number that they're kind of done. That's it. They can sit back and go on their merry way and they never have to really look at it again. But because I have my own podcast and a lot of people, a lot of the guests that I have on there, they share stories about how they resisted raising prices, even though customers were telling them to. They knew they should, but they were scared to do it. And as a result, they didn't grow their businesses. They struggled to be profitable. And the thing is that your prices are going to change and evolve over time. And the sooner that you come to terms and accept that, the easier it's
Mhm.
going to be for you to do what needs to be done. And
Absolutely.
generally, there's not huge issues in changing prices. Depends on the type of business. Yeah. But for most small businesses, adjusting and changing prices from time to time is not going to be a big thing, as long as you know how to communicate it well, of course. But the important thing here is that, to understand that it isn't like a one-time exercise in your business. Pricing is actually a process. How do I set it? How do I get it? How do I manage it? How do I set it? It's like this cycle you go through in your business. And you have, after you're experienced enough, you can have one eye over here kind of, paying attention to it once in a while, but it doesn't take as much effort as it does when you're first starting.
That is so true. Janine, I love talking about pricing because I really do believe, like you, that it's at the core of your profitability. But we're going to stop here, and I'm going to tell folks, if you've enjoyed Janine's conversation, if you like her insights and you want to learn more, go over to thepricinglady.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. Janine, thanks for being a part of the show.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to find more resources for your business, subscribe to our newsletter and look for More Than a Few Words wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.